There's a kind of loyalty that doesn't get rewarded. It just gets used. That's what I learned after 5 years at Northpoint Analytics. 5 years of early logins, late nights, quick favors, and staying calm while everyone else panicked. I was the safe pair of hands, the one they trusted to fix things quietly. "You're such a team player, Lena," they'd say, like it was a compliment. It was a leash. I started there right out of college, fresh-faced and grateful just to have a job in my field. I learned the systems fast, picked up the extra workload when others quit, and volunteered for projects that weren't technically mine. I told myself it would pay off. It didn't. The raises were small, the praise smaller, but I kept going because that's what you're supposed to do, right? You stay loyal, prove your worth, and eventually someone notices. Except no one did. That Monday started like any other: lukewarm coffee, inbox full of quick asks, and Dalton standing by my cubicle pretending he didn't see the chaos he created. He was my boss, technically. In reality, he was a man who liked to delegate responsibility and take credit. We had an unspoken arrangement. I kept him looking competent, and in return I got, well, more work. Around 10 a.m., I got the meeting invite. Subject: transition planning discussion. Attendees: me, Dalton, and HR. No details, just that phrase, transition planning. It sounded harmless enough, like a new project kickoff. I even brought my notebook. The HR rep, a woman named Janine, smiled too much when I walked in. That's when I knew something was wrong. Dalton cleared his throat, doing that fake sympathetic expression I'd seen him use on clients. "Lena, you've been an incredible asset to the company." He paused, like he was waiting for me to say thank you. "However," he continued, "the executive teams made the decision to restructure the department. We're optimizing workflows and consolidating roles to better align with our growth strategy." Translation: we're cutting costs. My stomach dropped. "Okay," I said slowly. "So what does that mean for my position?" Janine chimed in, voice bright and clinical. "It means your current role will be concluding at the end of the quarter." I blinked. Concluding. Dalton jumped back in. "But you'll be essential during this transition period. We'll need you to help onboard and train the new team member taking over your responsibilities. Think of it as passing the torch." Passing the torch. He actually said that. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. It didn't come. "So let me get this straight," I said. "You're eliminating my position, but I'm supposed to train the person replacing me." Janine smiled like I just solved a puzzle. "Exactly." Dalton nodded. "You'll be compensated, of course, and we'd love to keep you as a reference point for future projects." I laughed out loud. It wasn't even intentional, it just slipped out, sharp and humorless. They both looked uncomfortable. "Right," I said, "a reference point." I walked out of that meeting numb. Everyone else at the office already knew, of course. You can always tell by the way people avoid your eyes, the pity smiles, the quiet whispers. When I sat back down at my desk, my inbox already had a follow-up email from Janine. "We're so grateful for your cooperation during this transition. Your professionalism sets an example for the whole department." Professionalism, that word again. The corporate translation for "don't make a scene while we screw you over." That night, I stayed late, not because I had to, but because I didn't know what else to do. The office was quiet. The city lights outside reflected off the windows, making the cubicles look like empty glass cages. I sat there staring at the spreadsheet I'd built, the one that kept the entire department running. Every project deadline, every invoice, every client contact. It was my creation, the invisible skeleton holding everything together. And they were just handing it off. For the first time in 5 years, I felt something break loose in my chest. Not sadness, not fear, but clarity. They'd been telling me I was lucky to have this job for years. But maybe they were lucky to have me. I closed the spreadsheet, opened a blank document, and typed the title. Transition Training Outline. Then I smiled, just a little. If they wanted me to train my replacement, I'd do it. I smile, nod, and hand over every piece of knowledge they asked for. But this time, the lessons would come with a few creative gaps. Nothing malicious, nothing illegal. Just the truth, edited for their convenience. After all, I'd learned from the best. That was the night I stopped being loyal and started being careful. The next morning, I walked into the office to find everyone suddenly overly nice. That's how you can always tell they know something you're not supposed to talk about. Too many smiles, too many, how are you holding up? Questions from people who never cared before. It was like I'd developed a terminal illness overnight, and everyone was afraid of catching it. Even the intern brought me a coffee. "You've done so much for the team," she said softly, like she was rehearsing a eulogy. "Thanks," I said, staring at the cup. "Guess I'll miss the free refills." Around 10, Dalton summoned me again. This time, he wasn't pretending to be sympathetic. He was brisk, efficient, the guilt had worn off. "Lena, this is Jessica," he said, gesturing to the young woman standing beside him. "She's going to be shadowing you for the next few weeks while we finalize the restructuring." I turned to look at her. She couldn't have been older than 23. Bright smile, glossy hair, notebook already open in her hands. She looked like every LinkedIn success story you scroll past when you're too tired to keep believing in meritocracy. "Hi," she said cheerfully. "I've heard so much about you." I smiled, automatic and practiced. "All good things, I hope." She laughed. "Oh, definitely. Mr. Dalton says you're basically the backbone of this place." My smile didn't falter, but something in my stomach did. The backbone of a body they were about to bury. Dalton clapped his hands together. "Lena, I'll leave you two to get started. Jessica's eager to learn, and I know you'll be as thorough and professional as always." He left before I could respond, probably to go congratulate himself for his leadership. Jessica turned to me, eyes wide with curiosity. "So, where do we start?" I studied her for a moment. She was nervous, but eager, someone who hadn't learned yet how sharp corporate smiles could be. None of this was her fault. And yet, she was the face of the knife being twisted in. "Let's start with the database," I said finally. "It's the heart of the company's workflow." I watched her scribble that down, word for word like a good student. Over the next hour, I walked her through the basics, where files were stored, how to generate reports, which systems to double-check before sending deliverables. Everything was true, mostly. I left out small things, subtle, invisible things. The naming convention for quarterly folders that wasn't quite standard. The redundant backup system only I knew how to navigate. The color-coding pattern that flagged client urgency. Tiny omissions, microscopic fractures in the foundation. To anyone else, it would look like a thorough, professional training. To me, it was the blueprint for poetic justice. By noon, she was brimming with questions. "How do you keep track of so much at once?" "Habit," I said. "You'll get used to it." "Do you ever worry about making mistakes?" "All the time," I said honestly. "The trick is to make them look intentional." She laughed, scribbling it down like it was wisdom instead of warning. I almost felt bad, almost. Later that afternoon, we went over client communications. Jessica hovered beside my desk, watching me draft an email. "Oh," she said suddenly, "Dalton mentioned that after you leave, I'll probably take over his weekly reports too. He said he wants me to learn from your structure." "Did he?" I asked lightly, typing faster. "Yeah, he said he might have me present to the board next quarter." I froze for just a second, long enough for her to notice. "Is that weird?" she asked, frowning. "Did I say something wrong?" "No," I said quickly. "Just ambitious. The board's tough. You'll want to make sure your data sources match the performance dashboards." "Oh, good to know. Where do I find those?" I smiled faintly. "Don't worry, I'll show you." I didn't. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, she was exhausted but happy. "I can't believe how much you do here," she said. Honestly, they should be paying you double. They're not, I said dryly. She laughed, thinking I was joking. As she packed up, she said, Dalton told me you're transitioning to a new opportunity. I hope I can make you proud. That almost broke me. Because in her voice, there wasn't arrogance, there was admiration. She genuinely thought we were a team. And for a split second, I hated that the same company that had chewed me up was about to do the same to her. But pity wouldn't pay my bills, and kindness hadn't saved me before. So I smiled and said, You'll do great, Jessica. Just remember, document everything. It makes life easier. She nodded eagerly. Got it. When she left, I stayed behind again. The office was quiet except for the hum of the AC and the glow of the monitors. I pulled up the project tracker and stared at the maze of formulas and file paths I'd built over the years. It was a monument to invisible labor, the kind no one claps for but everyone depends on. Then, slowly, I began removing the labels. Not deleting, just rearranging, renaming, moving pieces around like a puzzle that only I knew the answer to. When I finished, I sat back and exhaled. It wasn't destruction. It was reclamation. If they wanted to replace me, fine. But they'd have to rebuild the world I built from scratch. There's something uniquely painful about watching someone thrive in the space you built from scratch. By the end of week 1, Jessica had already won them over. Dalton called her a quick study. HR described her as a breath of fresh air. Even people who hadn't spoken to me in months suddenly found excuses to stop by our cubicle, all smiles and compliments. Wow, she's picking things up fast, they'd say, glancing at me. You must be a great teacher. I'd smile, pretending to take the compliment. Because that's what professionals do. But inside, it burned. Every time Jessica got praised for a brilliant idea, I recognized it as one of mine, repackaged, simplified, stripped of credit. I'd taught her the system. She'd simply walked into the applause. By week 2, Dalton stopped CCing me on important emails. Meetings I used to run now went straight to Jessica's calendar. He still called me a key part of the transition, but his tone had shifted, less respectful, more patronizing. Don't overcomplicate things for her, Lena, he said one afternoon, leaning on my cubicle wall. She's got a fresh approach. We don't want to overwhelm her with, legacy methods. Legacy methods. That was his new term for my work. I stared at him, smiling thinly. Of course, wouldn't want to confuse her with efficiency. He didn't even catch the sarcasm. Jessica, for her part, remained relentlessly kind. Too kind, almost, like she could sense the tension but didn't know how to fix it. Dalton said I could take over the client reports this week, she told me one morning, holding a coffee in both hands like a peace offering. He said it's good practice before you know. Before I'm phased out, I said, without looking up from my screen. She winced. I didn't mean it like. It's fine. She hesitated, then set the coffee on my desk. You make it look so easy, Lena. I don't know how you keep track of everything. I'm terrified I'm going to mess something up. I finally looked up. Her face was so open, so genuinely anxious, that for a moment my anger softened. You will mess up, I said. Everyone does. She blinked. Really? Sure, I said. The trick is to make sure when you do, it looks like the system's fault, not yours. Her nervous laugh told me she thought I was joking. That afternoon, Dalton stopped by Jessica's desk to check in. You're doing great, he said loudly enough for half the office to hear. Your presentation format is exactly what I've been wanting. Streamlined, clear, modern. Thank you, Jessica said, smiling brightly. Lena showed me the template. Dalton's expression flickered for just a moment before he recovered. Ah, well, you're already making it your own. That's the kind of initiative I like to see. I didn't say a word, just watched him walk away, leaving a trail of charm and cheap cologne. Jessica turned to me, eyes uncertain. Did I say something wrong? No, I said quietly. You said the truth. That's usually the wrong thing around here. By week 3, My exit date was officially announced in a company-wide email. As part of our growth strategy, Lena will be moving on to new opportunities. Please join us in thanking her for her years of hard work and dedication. No mention of the projects I'd led. No mention of the systems I'd built. Just the corporate equivalent of, she served her purpose. That's when the idea stopped being fantasy and became a plan. If they wanted to pretend I was replaceable, fine. I'd show them what happened when the irreplaceable stopped holding everything together. I started small. Little shifts in the file structures, harmless enough that no one would notice right away. Then I adjusted a few formulas in the analytics sheets. Not broken, just misleading. The kind of subtle error that would compound quietly over time. I documented everything, screenshots, old versions, timestamps, stored safely on a drive at home. I wasn't reckless. I wasn't sabotaging. I was just reclaiming the years of invisible labor they'd stolen. The satisfaction was quiet, controlled, methodical. By week 4, Jessica was glowing with confidence. "I think I finally understand how everything fits together," she said, grinning as she handed me a printed report. "Let's take a look," I said, scanning it. The numbers looked perfect, too perfect. Exactly what Dalton liked to see. "Good job," I said. "You're ready." "Really?" Her face lit up. I nodded. "You'll do great. Just remember, double-check the revenue attribution columns before submitting." She frowned. "Wait, which columns are those again?" "You'll find them," I said lightly. "They're labeled in the internal tracker." They were, not anymore. That Friday, Dalton invited Jessica to join the leadership meeting. "Just a chance to observe," he said, though everyone knew he loved showing off his new prodigy. I wasn't invited, of course. My final 2 weeks were administrative wrap-up. When they returned, Jessica looked pale. "How was it?" I asked. "It was fine," she said quickly, sitting down. "Just a little overwhelming. Dalton asked me to summarize the Q3 metrics, and I think I mixed up 2 figures. He seemed annoyed." I shrugged. "Don't worry, he'll get over it eventually." She laughed nervously. "You're kidding, right?" I smiled. "Sure." That night, I stayed late again, not to fix anything this time, but to finish the process. I double-checked every altered file, ensuring everything appeared functional at a glance. To anyone else, it would look like an efficient, well-oiled system. But the moment someone changed a single variable, one update, one metric refresh, the formulas would eat themselves alive. It wasn't chaos. It was karma written in Excel. I packed my bag, turned off the lights, and stood for a long moment in the glow of my monitor. They made me invisible for 5 years. Now they were going to see exactly how much that invisibility had been holding everything together. By the time my 4th week hit, I'd stopped counting the days. I wasn't working toward my last paycheck anymore. I was counting the moves left in a quiet game I hadn't told anyone I was playing. On paper, everything looked perfect. Jessica was integrated. The department was stronger than ever. Dalton was already boasting in leadership calls about his seamless transition process. And me. I smiled, took notes, and made sure every single gear in the machine turned just slightly out of sync. Not broken, just misaligned. That was the beauty of it, subtle enough to pass audits, damaging enough to slowly rot from within. Every morning, Jessica would appear at my desk like an eager intern in a mentorship montage. She carried color-coded notes, a highlighted handbook, and that unshakable optimism I remembered having once. Before I learned that in corporate life, hard work wasn't rewarded. It was harvested. "Morning," she chirped. "I went over the reports you showed me. I think I found a faster way to format them." I smiled politely. "Oh, show me." She leaned in, scrolling through the spreadsheet with pride. "See, I automated some of the headers. It'll save a ton of time." I pretended to be impressed. "That's creative." It was creative. It also meant the formulas would start referencing the wrong data fields after the next update. Nice initiative, I said. Keep it up. Her grin widened. Thanks, Lena, you're the best. It stung more than it should have. Not because she was taking my spot, but because she meant it. That afternoon, Dalton called us both into a quick sync. He leaned back in his chair, all charm and condescension, radiating that brand of leadership that looks like confidence but smells like self-preservation. Jessica, he said, smiling like a game show host, your progress has been phenomenal. The board's impressed. She blushed. Thank you, sir. I couldn't have done it without Lena. He waved a dismissive hand. Oh, Lena, been great, of course, but you've really brought new energy to the team. I bit the inside of my cheek. New energy was management speak for cheaper labor and better PR photos. Then he looked at me. How's the documentation coming along? Almost done, I said. I'm consolidating process notes into one system. Should be seamless. Good, he said. We'll need that before you wrap up. I smiled. You'll have everything you asked for. He had no idea how true that was. That evening, when the office emptied out, I opened the shared folder labeled Transition Guide. Inside were 46 separate documents, each a carefully curated mix of real instructions, vague advice, and invisible time bombs. Example: in the monthly report process, I included a step about data normalization checks that referenced a non-existent subfolder. It wouldn't throw an error, but it would misalign columns just enough to distort every quarterly projection. In the client retention dashboard, I'd used a deprecated macro that only I could fix, one that auto-updated when the system clock hit the first of the month. By the time anyone noticed, I'd be long gone. I wasn't trying to destroy the company. I was just returning it to the state it would have been in without me holding it together. Later that week, Jessica invited me to lunch. She picked a cafe across the street, the kind with overpriced salads and inspirational quotes printed on the napkins. She was nervous. I could tell by the way she stirred her iced latte. I wanted to ask, she said finally, how do you know when you're doing enough? I blinked. What do you mean? She sighed. Dalton's been nice, but he keeps pushing deadlines forward. Yesterday, he said, if Lena can do it, so can you. The bitterness in her voice surprised me. I leaned back. Let me guess, he tells you you're lucky to be here. She looked startled. Yeah, he says it's a huge opportunity. It's not, I said. It's a test to see how much you'll take before you break. She frowned. You sound like you don't trust him. I don't, I said simply. But you don't have to take my word for it. Just watch what happens when you say no. She smiled uncertainly. You make it sound like war. I stirred my coffee. It is. You just don't realize it until you've already lost something. When we got back, Dalton was waiting. There you are, he said too cheerfully. Lena, quick reminder, the audit team will be using your transition guide next month. Make sure it's airtight. Airtight. I nodded. Of course. He grinned. That's what I like about you, always dependable. I smiled back. Always. That night, I made my final adjustment, the kill switch buried under thousands of rows of data. One line of code that, once triggered, would reset half the metrics to their pre-automation state. No crash, no visible error. Just chaos disguised as normalcy. It wasn't revenge. It was math. Action and reaction. Input and output. They taught me to quantify value, so I did. As I packed up to leave, Jessica popped her head in. Hey, I just wanted to say I really appreciate you. I hope I can live up to the standard you've set. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. You'll do fine, Jessica. You've got talent. She hesitated. Will you stay in touch? Maybe, I said. The thing about transitions is they're meant to be clean. She looked confused, but nodded anyway. When she left, I shut down my computer, turned off the lights, and let the silence wash over me. The office smelled like dust and ambition. For years, I'd built this place, kept it running, saved people from their own incompetence. Now, I was finally done fixing things. Let it break. They called it a farewell celebration, but it felt more like a funeral where the corpse was expected to give a speech. It was held on a Thursday afternoon in the break room, the same fluorescent-lit box where we used to choke down cold pizza during late deadlines. Someone had swapped the pizza for a grocery store cake that read "Best Wishes, Lena," in blue frosting that looked more like printer ink. HR sent out a calendar invite titled Team Appreciation Event, celebrating Lena's contributions. The exclamation mark was doing a lot of work. By the time I walked in, people were already standing around pretending to enjoy themselves. Paper plates, plastic forks, half-hearted laughter, the soundtrack of corporate guilt. Dalton stood near the front, performing his role with the enthusiasm of a man who loved the sound of his own voice. 5 incredible years, he began, raising his cup of lukewarm punch. Lena, been the heart of this department, dependable, diligent, detail-oriented. She's leaving behind systems that will keep us strong for years to come. He smiled at me, expecting gratitude. I smiled back, because I knew something he didn't. Those systems were already ticking like slow fuses. Jessica hovered nearby, nervous but beaming. She was holding a small gift bag pink with gold tissue paper, her handwriting scrawled across the tag. You're the best. Dalton motioned toward her. And of course, Jessica's been learning from the best. Lena's mentorship has been invaluable. That's what makes transitions like this so successful: teamwork, cooperation, and positivity. Everyone clapped on cue, like trained seals. I forced a polite laugh, took a sip of punch, and counted how many people in the room had thrown me under the bus in the past 2 years. 8, by my estimate. 9 if you included HR. When the speech ended, people lined up for cake and small talk. Gonna miss you, Lena. You'll land on your feet. Don't be a stranger. All the phrases you use when you're glad someone else is leaving instead of you. Jessica approached last, holding out the gift bag. I got you something, she said shyly. I pulled out a framed photo, a group picture of the team, taken months ago at some forced team building event. Everyone was smiling, even me. Wow, I said softly, you even got Dalton's good side. She giggled. I just thought you'd want something to remember us by. Oh, I'll remember, I said. Dalton came over, clapping me on the shoulder. You know, Lena, you've really set Jessica up for success. I can't thank you enough for being such a professional during all this. I smiled sweetly. That's what I do best, remember, make sure things run smoothly. He grinned, completely oblivious. You're a class act. We'll miss your reliability around here. Don't worry, I said. The systems will remember me. He frowned slightly, not catching it. What's that? Nothing, I said, just sentimental. After the cake, people drifted back to their desks. HR handed me a white envelope with final payroll, printed in small font. Janine, the HR rep, gave me that sympathetic smile I'd come to hate. You've handled this with such grace, Lena. Most people would have made a scene. I try to stay professional, I said. That attitude will take you far. Funny, I said, it hasn't so far. She didn't laugh. When the crowd thinned out, Jessica and I were the only ones left in the break room. She was picking at a piece of cake, looking uncomfortable. Can I ask you something? She said quietly. Of course. Do you hate me? I blinked, caught off guard. She looked down. You've been so nice, but sometimes it feels like you're distant, like you're mad I'm here. I sighed. Jessica, I don't hate you. You do. No, I said. I hate the system that put you here, but not you. She looked relieved, but still uneasy. I just want you to know I really respect you. I mean, I can't believe they're letting you go after everything you've done. Neither can I said, smiling faintly. After she left, I lingered by the window for a moment. The skyline looked almost poetic from the 12th floor, glass towers glittering like they had something to prove. For years, I thought success was about belonging here, being part of something important. But all I'd ever done was build scaffolding for other people's egos. And now, the structure was standing on its own. Except it was. Back at my desk, I powered down my computer for the last time. I'd already cleaned out my drawers, a few pens, an old notebook, a photo of me at my first company retreat where I still looked hopeful. I slipped it into my bag, then inserted the final USB drive, the one labeled Backup Training Materials Final. It wasn't a backup. It was a mirror of every file I'd altered, an archive of what the system looked like before the rot set in. Insurance, proof. If things went down, no one could trace it back to me. I'd simply done my job, trained my replacement, and left them with all the necessary documentation. I ejected the drive and tucked it into my coat pocket. Then I stood there for a moment, taking one last look around. The office was quiet now. The same space that had seen every ounce of my effort, every invisible sacrifice, every late night spent fixing someone else's screw-up. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt done. When I walked out, the receptionist smiled politely. "Last day." "Yep," I said. "Leaving on good terms." I smiled. The best. I pushed open the glass doors, letting them close behind me with a soft hiss. The city air hit my face, sharp, clean, alive. It was strange, but I didn't feel regret. I felt like I'd just erased my name from a machine that didn't deserve it. Behind me, the office lights glowed like a ship drifting out to sea. Soon enough, it would start taking on water. The first text came 2 weeks after I left. I was at home, still adjusting to the concept of free time. My mornings no longer started with panic. My coffee actually stayed hot, and I could take a walk without feeling like I was wasting productivity. Then my phone buzzed. "Jessica, hey, random Q. Do you remember where the Q3 invoice templates are stored? The shared drive folder seems gone." I stared at the message for a long time, sipping my coffee. Gone. That word tasted poetic. I typed back a simple, diplomatic lie. Weird. Maybe check with Dalton. He probably reorganized it." Her reply came fast. "Jessica, oh okay, thanks. Sorry to bother," grinning face with sweat. I set the phone down and smiled. The first tremor in the foundation. By Friday, tremors turned into aftershocks. "Jessica, hi again, grimacing face, small issue. The report macros aren't running. It says invalid reference." Could be a date format thing. Try refreshing the data source. "Jessica, tried that, same error." Sorry, I'm not sure then. Been a while since I touched those files." The truth was, I knew exactly what was wrong. The invalid reference, error, meant the formulas were eating themselves alive, exactly as planned. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and reread the messages. I should have felt guilty, but instead, I felt lighter. Like every bug, every corrupted file, was another weight lifting off my chest. A week later, I got an email from Dalton. Subject, quick follow-up, hope you're doing well. Translation, we're screwed. Hey Lena. Hope you're settling into your new chapter. Just a quick question. Our automated dashboards are showing some discrepancies. Any chance you can hop on a quick call to walk Jessica through the logic? We'd really appreciate it. Shouldn't take long. Best. Dalton. I reread it 3 times, savoring the passive-aggressive warmth. Then I typed back. Hi Dalton. So nice to hear from you. Unfortunately, I've been pretty busy onboarding with a few clients for freelance work. I'd be happy to consult, though my rate's $150 hour, minimum 2 hours per session. Hope that helps. No signature, no kind regards, just the invoice energy he'd never respected before. He didn't reply. 2 days later, Jessica texted again. This time, the tone was different. Jessica, things are weird. The client deadlines are all off by a week, and Dalton said the retention dashboard is unusable. Jessica, he's freaking out lol. What's happening? I typed, deleted, retyped. Maybe the formula's updated automatically with the new quarter. Sometimes the system changes when the clock rolls over. It was true, sort of. I'd built it that way. Jessica, wow, that's so smart, lol. You really thought of everything. I try. That weekend, I met up with Ben, my old coworker from IT. He'd quit months before I did, the only person who'd ever called out Dalton's nonsense publicly. We grabbed lunch at a quiet cafe. So, he said, smirking over his burger, word around the grapevine is North Point's on fire. I shrugged. Define fire. 2 clients dropped them. Dalton's been sending all staff emails at midnight, and Jessica apparently cried in the bathroom last Thursday. I paused mid-sip. Cried. Ben nodded. Yeah, someone saw her leaving a meeting red-eyed. Guess Dalton blamed her for the bad data in the quarterly report. I set my drink down. The satisfaction faltered a little. Jessica didn't deserve that. She was naive, not cruel. Ben must have noticed my hesitation. Hey, don't tell me you're feeling bad. I'm not, I said automatically. He raised an eyebrow. You sure? Because the look on your face says guilt with a side of regret. I sighed. I didn't want her to get hurt. I just wanted them to realize what happens when you cut corners and treat people like tools. He leaned back. Well, they're learning, painfully. By the next Monday, the messages started piling up. Jessica, can you please call me? I think something's seriously wrong with the reports. Jessica, Dalton says I broke the forecast model, but I didn't even touch it, loudly crying face. Jessica, I can't find the client billing sheet anymore. It's literally gone. I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I could have told her how to fix it. I could have saved her. But that would have saved them too. And I couldn't bring myself to do that. So instead I wrote, you've got this, Jess. Trust your notes. You're smarter than they are. It wasn't a lie. Later that night, I logged into my laptop and opened the private archive, my shadow folder. Every file, every uncorrupted version, sat there neatly in order. The difference between their crumbling system and the one that still worked was one USB drive sitting in my desk drawer. I clicked through a few old spreadsheets just to see them alive again. Numbers aligned, dashboards functional, everything crisp, stable, mine. A small, almost guilty smile tugged at my lips. For the first time in 5 years, I wasn't invisible. Even if they didn't know it yet, they were feeling the outline of my absence. The next day, Ben texted me a screenshot of a company Slack message. Dalton, until further notice, please avoid using the automated templates for client reporting. We're identifying an issue with version control. Translation: everything's broken and we have no idea why. Beneath the message, someone had replied, anonymous, maybe we shouldn't have fired the person who built it. Ben added a laughing emoji. Ben, you seeing this? Poetic justice. I smiled at the screen but didn't reply. Because something inside me didn't feel like justice. It felt unfinished. That night, Jessica called me. Not texted, called. I almost didn't pick up, but curiosity won. Lena, her voice was small. I'm so sorry to bother you, Dalton's blaming me for everything. I think he's trying to make me take the fall. Breathe, I said quietly. What happened? He said I must have deleted files, but I didn't. He's yelling in meetings, saying I wasn't trained properly. I'm scared they're going to fire me. I closed my eyes, listening to her voice tremble. Jessica, I said finally, you did everything right. You just didn't realize you were working with something already broken. There was silence. Already broken, she whispered. I smiled faintly, the kind of smile you can hear through a phone. Sometimes systems collapse because they were designed to the wrong people's benefit. I heard her sniffle. I don't understand. Someday you will, I said softly. And when you do, don't let them blame you for what they caused. After we hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time, staring at the glow of my monitor. The implosion had started. But now, I wasn't sure if I wanted to watch the rest of it burn, or if it was time to walk away. By the third week, I'd almost stopped checking my phone for updates about North Point. Almost. I told myself I was done with that chapter, but detachment takes practice, especially when you've spent years building something only to watch it unravel from a distance. Then one morning, my inbox chimed. Subject, consulting opportunity, urgent. The sender, Dalton. I stared at it for a full minute before opening it. Hi, Lena. Hope you're doing well. We've hit a few unforeseen challenges with the workflow transition, and I was wondering if you'd be open to a short consulting arrangement. Just a few hours to get us back on track. Of course, we'll compensate you fairly. Appreciate your time and expertise. Dalton. I actually laughed out loud. The same man who told me my methods were outdated was now begging for my expertise. I took a slow sip of coffee and clicked reply. Hi, Dalton. Happy to help. My consulting rate is $150 hour, minimum 4-hour block. I can also offer workflow optimization packages starting at $1,200 flat rate. Let me know what works best for your budget. Best. Lena. I hit send, then went about my day. 2 hours later, his reply came in. That's significantly above our current consulting rates. Could we perhaps discuss a goodwill arrangement? You know, considering our positive history together. I grinned. Positive history. I typed back. I appreciate the offer, but my time's worth what it's worth. Let me know if you'd like to proceed at my standard rate. He didn't reply. 2 days later, he called. The number popped up as private. I knew who it was before I even answered. Dalton, I said cheerfully, to what do I owe the pleasure? Lena, his voice was too bright, too desperate. Hey, I just thought we could chat directly instead of all this back and forth. Of course, I said, sitting back in my chair. How are things? He hesitated. Good, busy, you know how it is. I'm still growing the department. A pause, something like that. Look, we've run into a few technical hiccups since the transition. Jessica's been doing her best, but some of your systems are, a little complex. I smiled. That's because they were designed to prevent human error. Unfortunately, that means they don't handle incompetence very well. He laughed awkwardly. Right, well, maybe you could, take a look. Just a few hours. I'll approve whatever compensation I can. Dalton, I said softly. You laid me off to save money. Now you're calling me because your cost-efficient replacement can't fix the mess you created. I'm not sure how to price poetic justice. He sighed. Come on, Lena, don't be like that. We've got deliverables due next week. I let the silence stretch until it started to itch. Finally, I said, tell you what, I'll think about it. Send me a contract with terms and payment up front. Can't you just? No, I said, I can't just, not anymore. I hung up before he could respond. That evening, I got a text from Jessica. Jessica, Dalton's losing it. Half the team's gone. HR's calling it strategic downsizing again. He keeps blaming me for the reports being wrong, but nothing makes sense anymore. Me, I'm sorry, Jess. That sounds awful. Jessica, he said he might bring you back. I told him you'd never come. Me, you told him right. There was a long pause before her next message. Jessica, I think he's hiding something. He keeps saying the numbers will stabilize, but every time I run the data, it looks worse. Me, that's because the system's telling the truth now. Jessica, what do you mean? Me, it means the numbers were never stable. I just made them look that way so he could keep his promotion. Jessica, oh my God. Me, yeah, welcome to North Point. She didn't reply for a while. When she finally did, it was just one message. Jessica, I'm quitting. The next morning, Dalton called again. Jessica's leaving, he said flatly. Do you know anything about that? Only that she's smart, I said. He groaned. You're enjoying this, aren't you? Enjoying what? I asked innocently. watching this place fall apart. I paused. I didn't break anything, Dalton. I just stopped fixing it. He went quiet. I could hear the hum of fluorescent lights through the phone, the same sound that used to fill our office. You really think you're better than all this, huh? He said finally. No, I said calmly. I just finally know my worth. He exhaled sharply, then ended the call without another word. Later that day, I met Ben again for lunch. He was practically glowing. You've seen the latest? He asked. Dalton's officially out. The board made him resign to spend more time with his family. I blinked. Already? Yup. Internal audit flagged months of inconsistencies. Guess whose documentation they found? My pulse quickened. Mine. He grinned. Yours. Every warning you ever emailed, every flagged report. Someone leaked it to the audit team. They traced the oversights straight back to Dalton's sign-offs. I couldn't help it, I laughed. Not out of spite, but relief. 5 years of being the invisible safety net, and now the trap had finally sprung. Ben leaned forward. You should have seen his face during the exit meeting. Apparently, he tried to blame you. HR pulled up your resignation email and said, Lena's documentation was impeccable. I shook my head, still smiling. I didn't even have to lift a finger. That night, I sat at my desk and opened the old backup folder one last time. All those clean, functional systems, perfectly stable when treated with respect. I deleted it, every copy, every receipt, every trace of the old world I'd built. Because I didn't need it anymore. Northpoint had finally learned what my absence was worth. And I was finally ready to stop defining myself by what I'd left behind. 2 days later, I got one final email from Dalton's company address. Subject, no hard feelings. You got what you wanted, I guess. Congrats on your consulting work. Hope it was worth it. I read it twice, then hit delete. It was worth it. Every silent hour, every ignored contribution, every thankless task that turned out to be the foundation of their success. For years, they taught me that being dependable meant being replaceable. Now they knew better. When the email hit LinkedIn, I knew it was official. Breaking. Northpoint Analytics announces leadership restructuring following internal audit review. There it was, public, permanent, poetic. The post went on to praise organizational resilience and a renewed commitment to transparency. But anyone who'd ever worked there could read between the lines. Translation. The ship was sinking, and they'd just thrown the captain overboard. Ben texted me the moment he saw it. Ben, told you it'd happen. Karma's got good timing. Me, yeah, poetic timing apparently. Ben, you proud? I stared at the message for a long moment. Was I? Part of me wanted to be. I'd spent years cleaning up their messes, swallowing insults, and pretending gratitude counted as payment. Watching everything collapse without my help should have felt triumphant. But instead, it just felt quiet. Like finishing a long book and realizing you don't want to reread it. A week later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. Hi, is this Lena Ward? A voice asked, warm, professional, practiced. This is she. My name's Renee. I'm a partner at Valence Consulting. We've heard good things about your work with workflow systems. Northpoint's situation has made you something of a legend in our circles. A legend. The word didn't sit comfortably. She continued, we're expanding our optimization division and would love to have someone with your experience on a contract basis. I almost laughed. Experience in what? Surviving bad management. She chuckled. We call it organizational foresight. Let's meet. You might find we're a little different from your last employer. We met at a sleek downtown cafe, one of those glass-walled places where everyone looked like they were halfway through closing a deal. Renee was sharp, confident, and refreshingly direct. We've been following the Northpoint audit, she said, sliding a folder across the table. From what we understand, their data architecture relied almost entirely on processes you designed. That's one way to put it, I said dryly. And those processes collapsed when you left. Seems that way. She smiled. We need someone who can prevent that from happening here. Build systems that last without burning out the people behind them. That stopped me. Without burning out the people behind them. I studied her for a long second. You actually mean that? Completely. We believe efficiency and humanity can coexist. We want to fix what companies like Northpoint broke. I wanted to believe her. So I said yes. My first day at Valence felt strange. Not bad, just surreal. No passive-aggressive emails. No fake praise. No one hovering to see if I was working efficiently. My new boss, Marcia, actually asked how I liked to structure my time. When I told her I worked best in focused blocks with breaks between, she nodded. Good, that's how I do it too. The first week, I caught myself flinching every time someone complimented me, waiting for the hidden jab that never came. When I presented a workflow model during our Friday meeting, Marcia said, "That's brilliant, Lena. You should lead the next client session." I stared at her for a beat too long before realizing she meant it. Old habits die hard. Meanwhile, Northpoint kept trending for all the wrong reasons. Articles surfaced about systemic mismanagement, falsified metrics, and negligence in data integrity. Dalton's name was mentioned just once, buried deep in a paragraph about former leadership. Jessica emailed me out of the blue. I saw the news. I wanted to say thank you not just for what you taught me, but for showing me what not to tolerate. I'm with a small firm now. They actually listen to me. I think you'd be proud. I smiled at my screen. I am proud. You got out before it broke you. That's all that matters. She replied with a heart emoji. Simple, sincere. It was the kind of closure you don't usually get in real life. Months passed. I built systems that didn't rely on invisible heroes. I hired assistants and actually paid them fairly. I learned to say no, not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Every so often, a company would reach out asking for Northpoint-level optimization, and I'd politely decline. Because what they really meant was, can you make us run perfectly while we still treat people like they're replaceable? And the answer to that was no. Not anymore. One evening, after a long week, I stayed late at the Valence office. The cleaning crew had gone, and the city lights shimmered through the windows. I opened my laptop and pulled up a new draft, Operational Integrity Framework V10. It wasn't just a technical manual. It was a philosophy: build systems that depend on respect, not martyrdom. Create checks that reward clarity, not exploitation. I worked until midnight, lost in the rhythm of creation, but it didn't feel like servitude anymore. It felt like freedom. When I finally closed my laptop, I saw my reflection in the glass. Calm, steady, no longer haunted by the hum of fluorescent lights. For the first time, I realized that what I'd built wasn't revenge. It was recovery. A few weeks later, Valence announced me as Director of Systems Integrity. The company newsletter included a quote I hadn't expected Marcia to use. The strongest systems aren't the ones that can't fail. They're the ones that don't forget who holds them together. Elena Ward. Reading it, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not pride, not victory. Peace. Later that night, I got one last email from an address I didn't recognize. It was short. You were right. We should have valued you when we had the chance. A former Northpoint employee. I didn't reply. Some messages don't need answers. I just closed my laptop, leaned back, and let the quiet fill the room. This time, it wasn't the silence of erasure. It was the silence of balance restored. 6 months after Northpoint's collapse, I stopped checking LinkedIn for their updates. Not out of disinterest, out of peace. Their downfall had finished echoing through the industry like a long, distant thunderclap. The audit was over. Dalton was out. The company had restructured under a new CEO with buzzwords like accountability and transparency pasted all over their press releases. And me. I'd built a new rhythm, Mornings that didn't start with dread. Projects where collaboration wasn't code for doing someone else's job. Clients who didn't flinch when I told them the truth. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was repair. So when the email arrived, it felt like a ghost tapping on the window. Subject: consultation request, Northpoint Analytics, under new management. I almost laughed. The message was polite, formal, and full of corporate penance. Dear Ms. Ward, I'm reaching out as the new Director of Operations at Northpoint Analytics. We're currently rebuilding our internal systems and would greatly value your expertise. I understand you were a key part of our infrastructure previously. We'd like to discuss a potential consulting engagement to help us restore integrity and stability. Sincerely, Emily Rhodes, Director of Operations. I reread it 3 times. It didn't sound like Dalton's Northpoint. It sounded sincere. But sincerity from a place that once taught me to swallow pride felt suspicious by default. I hovered over the delete button, then stopped. Curiosity's a dangerous thing. The next day, I mentioned it to Marcia during our morning sync at Valence. They want you back, she asked, eyebrows raised. They want me to consult, I corrected. Big difference. She smiled knowingly. Still, that's poetic, isn't it? Poetic or pathetic, I haven't decided yet. Will you meet with them? I hesitated. Part of me wants to say no on principle. The other part wants to hear them grovel. Marcia chuckled. Then do it. Closure's healthy. Just remember, closure doesn't mean returning to the scene of the crime. The meeting was set for Thursday afternoon. A downtown office, different building, same company name. When I walked in, everything felt unfamiliar, cleaner, brighter, stripped of the old rot. The receptionist smiled without the brittle edge of forced politeness. Even the walls had been repainted, as if they were trying to scrub the ghosts out of the drywall. Ms. Ward, they're expecting you, she said. Inside the glass-walled conference room sat 2 people, Emily Rhodes, the new director, and a man from HR whose face I didn't recognize. Emily stood to shake my hand. Lena, thank you for coming. I know this must feel strange. It does, I said honestly. Last time I was in a Northpoint conference room, I was being told to train my replacement. Her expression softened. I read your file. I'm sorry you were treated that way. The old leadership created a culture we're still trying to unlearn. Good, I said, because it nearly destroyed you. She nodded. That's exactly why we wanted to meet. You built a foundation we didn't understand until it was gone. We'd like your help rebuilding it the right way this time. I sat down slowly. Let me guess, the systems are still unstable. She smiled ruefully. Stable enough to limp, not enough to run. The new investors want transparency reports every quarter, and we can't keep them consistent. Half our client data was archived under legacy methods no one seems to understand. I bit back a smirk. Legacy methods, my legacy. So you want me to come in and fix it? We want you to teach us what sustainable systems actually look like, she said. Not just technically, but ethically. You warned them years ago about overwork, short-term decisions, burnout. We want to do better. The HR man spoke up for the first time. We're not asking for favors. You'll be fully compensated, of course, whatever your consulting rate is. I met his eyes. It's not about the money. Emily tilted her head. Then what is it about? Trust, I said, and proof that you've actually changed. She nodded thoughtfully. Then let me show you. She turned her laptop around. On the screen was a presentation titled Post-Audit Recovery Report. Slide after slide outlined their reforms: flat hierarchy, transparent pay bands, mental health support, fair workload distribution. I scrolled through quietly, trying not to let my skepticism show. We've lost good people, Emily said softly. People like you, we can't afford to make the same mistakes again. I leaned back, crossing my arms. 6 months ago, I would have said you didn't deserve saving. And now? Now, I said, I think everyone deserves a second chance, but that doesn't mean I'm the one who has to give it. She nodded slowly as if she'd expected that. Fair enough. If you change your mind, the offer stands. And for what it's worth, Dalton's gone. Permanently. Retired? I asked. Blacklisted. The audit uncovered things even we didn't know about: fake expense reports, client manipulation. He'll never work in management again. For the first time in years, I felt something close to satisfaction. Not joy, just peace. The kind that comes when the universe quietly balances its books. When I left the building, the afternoon sunlight hit the glass facade, and for a moment, I saw my reflection standing next to the new logo. Northpoint Analytics, reinventing integrity. The irony almost made me laugh. I walked to a nearby cafe and ordered a tea, letting the noise of the city fill the silence that used to feel like anxiety. My phone buzzed, a message from Marcia. Marcia, so how'd it go? Me, they begged nicely. Marcia, tempted. Me, a little, but I think I've already rebuilt something better. That night, I updated my personal website. Under the past projects section, I added one new line. Northpoint Analytics, Legacy Systems, 2018-2023. Built and retired frameworks that revealed the cost of invisible labor. It wasn't arrogance, it was truth. Then I opened a fresh document for my next proposal. Restorative systems, how to build workflows that don't exploit people. It wasn't for Northpoint. It was for every company that might become another Northpoint. Just before midnight, I got one final email from Emily. Thank you for meeting today, Lena. Whether or not you decide to work with us, I wanted you to know something. Everyone here knows your name now, not because of the damage, but because of the strength it took to walk away. I stared at it for a long moment, then closed my laptop. For years, I'd waited to hear those words. Not we need you, not we miss you. Just we finally see you. It had taken everything falling apart for that to happen. But at least now, I wasn't the one left picking up the pieces. The funny thing about peace is how quiet it really is. Not the awkward, heavy kind of silence that used to fill Northpoint's hallways, but the kind that hums beneath steady breathing, the sound of a life that finally belongs to you. 6 months into my role at Valence, I still caught myself waiting for the other shoe to drop, for the passive-aggressive email, for the late-night, urgent call, for the guilt trip disguised as gratitude. It never came. Instead, I woke up to messages like, "Great presentation, Lena. The client loved your clarity. Take tomorrow off, you've earned it. We're building this framework around your design. Can you lead the rollout?" Every time, I'd have to stop myself from over-explaining, from defending my decisions, from apologizing for being right. That instinct was harder to unlearn than any technical skill. Marcia noticed it one day during our project review. "You know," she said, looking up from her notes, "you don't have to justify every decision you make here." I blinked. "Sorry." She smiled. "You say sorry a lot too, force of habit." I laughed. "You could say that." "Well, break it. You're not being graded here." Her tone was kind, but it hit deeper than she probably realized. Because that's what Northpoint had been, a never-ending test with invisible criteria. And I'd spent years chasing grades no one intended to record. Now, for the first time, I was building something where people didn't have to prove their worth to be seen. By summer, my consulting division had expanded. Valence gave me a small team, 3 analysts and an intern named Maya. She reminded me so much of Jessica it almost hurt. Same hopeful grin, same habit of writing everything down like she could earn perfection by capturing it on paper. On her first week, she came to my desk clutching a notepad. "Hey, I think I broke the reporting sheet." I smiled. "You didn't break it, it's just missing context. Let me show you." She looked nervous. "I don't want to mess things up." "You won't," I said. "Mistakes are just unfinished lessons." She frowned. "Did you come up with that?" "Yeah," I said. "Had to." She laughed softly, and I felt something unclench inside me. the echo of an old wound finally healing. One Friday, after everyone had gone home, I stayed late reviewing a client proposal. The office was quiet except for the hum of the HVAC and the soft click of my keyboard. On the wall across from my desk hung the division's motto, one Marcia had chosen when we launched it. Build systems that serve people, not the other way around. It wasn't just a slogan, it was a reminder. Every file, every policy, every workflow I designed carried that promise. And for once, it wasn't performative. It mattered. A few weeks later, Valence hosted a networking event, one of those professional mixers where people say synergy unironically. I'd planned to make an appearance, say a few polite words, and escape. But halfway through, someone tapped me on the shoulder. It was Jessica. I blinked. Jessica. She grinned, surprise. She looked different, more confident, sharper. Like someone who'd been through the fire and decided to build a new shape from the ashes. "What are you doing here?" I asked. "I'm with Paladin Consulting now," she said. "We're partnering with Valence on the nonprofit optimization project. I saw your name on the invite and had to come." For a second, we just laughed, that disbelieving kind of laughter you share when life feels like it's finally stopped being cruel. "I never got to thank you properly," she said after a moment. "Not just for helping me survive North Point, but for everything after. You were right. Leaving was the best thing I ever did." I smiled. Me too. Later that evening, Marcia asked me to give a short speech. I almost said no. I wasn't a speaker. I was the person behind the systems, not the one with the microphone. But then I looked around, at my team, at Jessica, at the younger consultants watching me the way I once watched every senior in the room, and I realized I didn't want to stay invisible anymore. So I stood up. "Most of us here know what it's like to give everything to a company that forgets we're human," I began. "We've been told loyalty is noble, that staying quiet keeps the peace, that gratitude should replace fair pay." Heads nodded around the room. But loyalty without respect isn't a virtue. It's exploitation dressed as devotion. I used to believe my worth was tied to how much I could hold together. I was wrong. The real measure of strength isn't endurance. It's knowing when to stop carrying what was never yours to fix. The room was silent, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that feels like listening. "So if you take anything from my story," I said finally, "let it be this: build something that outlasts you, but don't let it own you. Leave space for yourself in your own success." I stepped down to quiet applause that didn't feel performative. It felt genuine, and for once, that was enough. Afterward, Jessica caught me near the exit. "You should post that somewhere," she said. "People need to hear it." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe it just needs to stay here between the people who actually lived it." She nodded, understanding. Still, it meant something. I smiled. That's the only metric I measure now. That night, back home, I opened my laptop and pulled up a blank document titled Lessons Learned. But this time, it wasn't a manual for survival. It was a blueprint for rebuilding not systems, but self-worth. The first line I typed was simple. Never train your replacement, train your successor. Then I wrote the second. And make sure they know the difference. I sat there a while just looking at those words. They weren't a threat. They were a promise to myself, to Jessica, to Maya, to anyone who'd ever been told they were too reliable to let go. Because the truth was, I hadn't just gotten revenge. I'd rewritten the rules. When I finally went to bed, I dreamed not of spreadsheets or deadlines, but of open spaces, clean desks, soft light, laughter that didn't sound forced. For the first time in years, I wasn't haunted by the ghosts of old systems or old wounds. I was building something new. And this time, it wasn't for them. It was for me. By the time the journalist emailed me, I'd almost forgotten what Dalton's voice sounded like. It was early autumn, the kind of crisp morning that made the city smell clean for once. I was halfway through my coffee when the subject line caught my eye. Inquiry. Investigative feature on corporate retaliation and whistleblowing. Request for comment. The sender was Ava Green, investigative reporter for the Ledger. I'd read her work before, the kind of articles that didn't just report the truth, but peeled back its skin. I opened it cautiously. Dear Ms. Ward, I'm working on a long-form feature about Northpoint Analytics, collapse, and its broader implications for workplace ethics in the tech sector. Several former employees have mentioned your name, describing you as instrumental in both the company's success and its unraveling. I'd love to interview you. You're not under investigation. This is about telling the story right, through your eyes. Respectfully, Ava Green. My pulse slowed, then quickened again. Through my eyes. It had been more than a year since Northpoint fell. I'd made peace, built new systems, even found purpose again. But there it was, the past, knocking politely. I stared at the email for a long time, torn between curiosity and dread. Then, without quite knowing why, I typed back. I'm not sure I have anything left to say, Ava, but maybe that's not the same as having nothing worth hearing. Let's talk. We set a date. Ava met me at a quiet cafe near the river, the same one where I'd met Jessica months before. She was exactly as I expected. Sharp-eyed, calm, the kind of person who listened with intent rather than agenda. Thank you for meeting me, she said, sliding a recorder onto the table. I know this can't be easy. Depends on the question, I said lightly. She smiled. Fair enough, let's start simple. What really happened at Northpoint? I hesitated. That depends on which part you want, the truth, or the version they put in the press release. The truth, she said. So I told her. About the years of invisible labor, the project thefts, the burnout disguised as loyalty, about Jessica, about being told to train my replacement. And finally, about what happened after I walked away. I didn't confess everything, not the code I'd left behind, not the quiet rot I'd built into the bones of their systems, but I told her enough. When I finished, she sat in silence for a long moment, pen resting against her notebook. You don't sound angry anymore, she said. I was, I admitted, for a long time, but anger's just energy with nowhere to go. Eventually, you learn to build something with it. She nodded slowly. You know, most people I interview want revenge. You wanted accountability. I wanted acknowledgement, I said softly, but that's harder to get. Ava switched off the recorder and leaned forward. Can I ask something off the record? Sure. Did you really sabotage their systems? I froze for half a second too long. She smiled faintly. Relax, I'm not here to expose you. Half a dozen people I've talked to said you were the only reason that company ran at all. If it fell apart, that's not sabotage, that's gravity. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. You're good at this. I listen, she said simply. And you'd be surprised how often the truth sounds like rebellion to people who have never been held accountable. She stood to leave, tucking her recorder away. I'll send you the draft before it runs. You'll have approval over your quotes. I want to make sure this story belongs to you. I nodded, still unsure how I felt. Thank you. As she walked away, I realized that for the first time in years, someone wasn't asking me to justify myself. They were asking to understand. A week later, she sent the draft. The title hit me first. The Woman Who Let It Break. How One Analyst Exposed the Myth of Replaceability. The article was devastating, honest, unflinching. It painted me as the quiet center of a corporate storm, the person who held a company together until it collapsed under its own hypocrisy. It quoted me saying, "When you stop fixing things for people who refuse to learn, they call it betrayal. But all you've done is stop saving them from themselves." I didn't even remember saying that out loud. The story went viral within hours of publication. LinkedIn flooded with think pieces. Former Northpoint employees came out of hiding. A podcast called it the cautionary tale every CEO should hear. And just like that, the ghost I thought I'd buried was resurrected, this time in headlines. The next morning, My inbox was chaos. Some messages were congratulatory. "You're an inspiration, Lena. Your story gave me the courage to quit my job." Finally, someone said it out loud. Others were less kind. "So you admit to sabotaging your employer. Enjoy your 15 minutes, martyr. Hope no one ever trusts you again." I read them all, then I deleted most of them. Because the truth wasn't for them, it was for me. At Valence, the response was overwhelmingly supportive. Marcia stopped by my office that afternoon with a smile. "You okay?" she asked. "Mostly," I said. "I didn't expect it to blow up like that." "Good stories never stay quiet," she said, "especially the ones people need to hear." I nodded. I just didn't want to become a symbol. She tilted her head. "Maybe the world needed one, and maybe you needed to see how far you've come." I looked out the window at the skyline, the same one that once made me feel small. "Yeah," I said, "maybe." A few days later, I got a message from Jessica. "Read the article. You were brave to tell the truth. Thank you for showing that walking away isn't failure, it's freedom." I smiled. Then another message arrived, from an address I didn't recognize. No subject line, no greeting, just one sentence. "You didn't have to burn the house down to prove you built it." No signature. But I knew that tone. "Dalton." I stared at the message, a flicker of old anger sparking in my chest, then fading just as fast. I hit delete. He didn't deserve a reply. That night, as I walked home, the city lights reflected off the river like data points in motion. For years, I'd been part of someone else's story, the loyal worker, the scapegoat, the invisible hero. Now I was the author. And this time, I didn't need to explain the ending. It was raining the day I went back. Not a storm, just the kind of steady, quiet drizzle that makes cities look like they're exhaling. The streets shimmered, the air smelled faintly of metal and rain-soaked concrete, and every reflection on the glass buildings looked slightly distorted, like memories that had been waiting for me to come back. North Point's old office was still there, though the name on the front had changed. The blue lettering I once saw every morning had been replaced by sleek silver script, Rhodes & Co. Analytics. Same walls, different owners. I hadn't planned on going inside, but sometimes closure isn't a decision, it's a pull. The lobby looked the same. Cold marble floors, two bright lights, the same hum of recycled air. The receptionist smiled politely. "Can I help you?" "Just visiting," I said, returning the smile. "Used to work here a long time ago." Her eyes softened. "We get that a lot lately. The company's changed a lot since then." "I can tell." She nodded toward the elevators. "You can go up to the mezzanine if you like. It's open to visitors now. They kept the old company timeline on the wall." Of course they did. History sells well when you sanitize it. The mezzanine was quiet. The timeline stretched across the far wall, 10 years of milestones, carefully curated. 2015, founded with a mission to revolutionize data integrity. 2018, expanded into national markets. 2023, leadership transition, renewed commitment to ethical growth. No mention of Dalton, no mention of the audit. And certainly, no mention of me. I stood there for a while, reading the empty spaces between the lines. That's where the real story lived, between the milestones, in the invisible labor that made them possible. The late nights, the crises averted, the work quietly claimed by others. The ghosts of the overachievers, who'd kept this place running until it burned them out. For years, I'd been one of them. Now, I was just someone passing through. I wandered toward the glass balcony that overlooked the city. The view hadn't changed, gray skyline, streaks of light cutting through fog, but I wasn't looking for nostalgia. I was looking for perspective. It hit me then, how different I felt standing here now. The weight that used to live in my chest, the anxiety, the need to prove, the quiet resentment was gone. I'd carried those things like armor once, but the thing about armor is, After the war ends, it just becomes heavy. Behind me, a voice said, "Excuse me, Lena." I turned. Emily Rhodes stood near the timeline wall, an umbrella dripping in her hand. I smiled. "Emily, didn't expect to see you here." "I didn't expect to see you here either," she said, stepping closer. "But I'm glad you came. We're actually closing this building next month, moving to a smaller headquarters. Starting over again." She nodded, trying to do it right this time. Her tone wasn't defensive, it was humble, real. "You read the article?" I asked. "Of course," she said quietly. "I made everyone read it. It started a lot of uncomfortable conversations, but the good kind. We've been rebuilding culture from the ground up. Transparent hearing, shared profits, balanced workloads, the works." I raised an eyebrow. "So progress." She smiled, slow but honest. For the first time, I believed her. We stood by the window in silence for a while, watching the rain trace patterns across the glass. "I wanted to thank you," Emily said finally. "What you did, walking away, letting it fall, it forced change we never would have had the courage to make." "I didn't do it for you," I said, but there was no malice in my tone. "I did it because I couldn't keep pretending anymore." "I know," she said, "but sometimes change needs a spark. You were ours." I looked out at the skyline again. Maybe, or maybe I just stopped being your fire extinguisher. That made her laugh softly. "Either way, thank you." Before I left, she handed me something, a small, sealed envelope. "What's this?" "Something we found in the archives while digitizing old project files. I thought you might want it." I hesitated, then took it. "You sure?" She nodded. "It's yours." Outside, I ducked under an awning and opened it. Inside was a printed email from 5 years ago, one of mine. The subject line read, "Proposal, workflow optimization to prevent burnout." I remembered that message vividly. I'd written it after a 70-hour week, after watching 2 teammates quit from exhaustion. It had been ignored. Now, there was a handwritten note attached on company letterhead. "You were right, we should have listened sooner. ER." For a moment, I just stood there in the rain, reading it over and over. Not because I needed the validation, but because it meant someone, somewhere, finally acknowledged what had always been true. The quiet work matters. The people who hold everything together deserve to be seen before they walk away. That evening, back at Valence, I slipped the letter into a folder labeled Reminders. It joined a handful of other things. My old resignation email, the USB drive I never used again, the first thank you card Maya ever gave me. It wasn't a trophy case. It was a map of how far I'd come. When I closed the folder, I noticed Maya still working a few desks away. "You should go home," I said. She grinned sheepishly, "Just wrapping up a few things." I raised an eyebrow. "Don't let this place turn you into me." She laughed. "You mean brilliant and terrifying." I chuckled. "I mean overworked and underpaid." She smiled. "Not possible, you taught me better." That stopped me for a moment, because she was right. The cycle had broken. Later that night, I walked through the empty Valence office, lights dimmed, the city glowing outside. I placed the envelope from Emily in my desk drawer and shut it gently. Then I stood there for a while, breathing in the silence. Not the sterile kind from North Point's corridors. This silence was alive, earned, full of space to dream. For the first time in years, I wasn't haunted by the idea of being forgotten. Because I wasn't invisible anymore. I was seen, heard, remembered. Not because I broke something, but because I built something better in its place. When I left the office, the rain had stopped. The streets gleamed under the streetlights, and the puddles reflected pieces of the city like shattered mirrors slowly coming together again. I walked past a group of young professionals laughing under umbrellas, all talking about projects, deadlines, promotions, the kind of conversations that used to define me. But I didn't feel envy anymore. I felt gratitude, because I knew exactly how far I'd come from the person who once thought survival meant silence. I stopped at the crosswalk and looked up at the skyline one last time. Somewhere in that forest of glass and steel was the old North Point building. New name, new leaders, new ghosts. I didn't hate it. I didn't love it either. It just existed. A relic of a story that had already found its ending. When the light changed, I crossed the street and didn't look back.